Over the past few weeks, I've had a steady stream of emails, comments, and private messaging, and they're all saying different versions of the same thing. And it's about judgment. So, surely it's okay to judge people like Bill Gates. How can we not judge those who have caused so much harm? If we don't call it out, we're just letting them off the hook. And that's the sort of flow that I've been getting. And if you felt that, I really hear you. You're not alone. You've seen the lies. You've watched friends and family suffer. You've witnessed control, coercion, manipulation, sometimes from those you trusted. And of course, there's outrage. Of course, there's grief. It's not about pretending those things didn't happen or anything daft like that. You're not wrong for feeling them, but there is something deeper that keeps getting missed in these conversations. And it's this: not all awakening is the same. Most people are operating from a single layer of awareness, thinking that just because they've clocked the corruption that they've woken up. But what if I told you there are two levels of awakening, and that without both, we're just repeating the same patterns in a different outfit? This isn't about blame. It's not about spiritual bypass. It's not about telling you to sit quietly while the world burns. No, it's about helping you to see what's really happening inside you and outside you. And then that means you can actually reclaim your power, not just in your opinions, but in your state of being. So let's talk about the two levels of awakening: the trap of judgment and the power of the mirror work. Because if we miss these pieces, we'll keep fighting shadows and we'll call it freedom. Look, it's like ant and dec. Technically, you could have one without the other, but I don't think anyone actually sees the point. Something's missing. Something just feels off. And that's what this video is here to name. So we can finally get out of the loop and feel liberation. Okay, level 1. This is an outer awakening. This is where most people in the freedom movement are sitting. It's the moment you realize the world isn't what you were told. You start seeing the corruption, you see the manipulation, you spot the patterns in big pharma, the media, politics, finance, blah, blah, blah. You clock the censorship, the coercion, and the control. You realize you've been lied to, and suddenly everything changes. It's really, really bloody painful. It's empowering, but it's necessary. And this level is important. You're meant to feel the fire of it. But level 2 is inner awakening. And this one is softer, quieter, slower. It doesn't get claps or social media followers. It doesn't give you a list of people to blame, because this one isn't about them. It's about you. It's about your wounds, your reactions, your fear, your need to be right, your addiction to control, your hidden superiority, all the parts of you that still feel kind of like unsafe unless someone else is wrong. And this is where people get stuck. They think owning crystals, going to yoga, ayahuasca ceremonies, or saying love and light means they're doing the inner work. But if you're still judging, needing enemies, still clinging to identity of outrage, you have gone about it the wrong way. You've just swapped the costume. You've built a new identity on top of the same survival script. There's no point waking up to corruption if you're still running the same energy it was built on. So blame, fear, power, blah, blah, blah. There's no point pulling apart the system outside if you're not willing to look at the system inside you. And this is where it gets really uncomfortable, because once you realize that inner awakening is about you, you can't ignore what's happening inside your own nervous system anymore. You can't keep pointing fingers without asking what it's protecting you from. The charge you feel when you see someone like Bill Gates or Fauci, it's not just outrage, it's an invitation. Because judgment is never clarity, it's fear. And fear isn't where your power lives. So let's explain this a bit more. Judgment is fear in disguise. It shows up looking like certainty, like strength, like moral high ground. But underneath, it's always the same thing. A part of us that feels unsafe, unseen, out of control. When we judge, what we're really saying is, I need you to be wrong so I can feel right. It's a nervous system loop, a survival script. It tells us that if we can put enough distance between us and them, we won't have to face what's unresolved in ourselves. But that distance is an illusion because there is no them. They're just the parts of us we're not willing to look at yet. That doesn't mean you stop speaking the truth. It doesn't mean you excuse harm. But there's a big difference between calling something from presence and reacting from a wound. One is clear and it feels clear. The other is charged. One brings change. The other just repeats the same loop in a different costume. Judgment is always a clue, not about them, but what still needs healing in you. And this is where the mirror work comes in. The world is always mirroring something back to us. Not to blame us, don't get me wrong, not to shame, but to show us. Every reaction you have is information. Every person who spikes your nervous system, who you obsess over, who you can't stop judging, whether it's your ex, a politician, or bloody Bill Gates, it's holding up a mirror to something that's still alive in you. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Well, what the hell does someone like an elite have to do with me? I'm nothing like them. And consciously, you're not, but the mirror doesn't reflect your behavior. It doesn't say you're the same as them. It reflects your wounding. It shows you what you still haven't fully processed, what still controls you, what still gets to decide your state of being. So let's say you look at some elite and feel that familiar twist in your stomach, the disgust, the helplessness, the fury, that visceral sense that the person, the elite, represents everything that's wrong with the world. On the surface, it seems obvious. He's done harm, blah, blah, blah. But the deeper question is, why does this trigger live in my body? Because if it was just a neutral observation or of discernment, and you see wrongfulness, there wouldn't be a charge. There wouldn't be a spiral loop in your chest or your stomach. The emotional charge is yours, and it's likely tied to an old survival wound. Maybe it's the fear that people with power will always take from you. Maybe it's the deep sense that no matter what you do, you'll never be safe. Maybe it's the belief that the world is controlled by forces you can't escape. So your nervous system stays in hypervigilance just in case. That's the point of the mirror. Not to tell you you're wrong for noticing harm, but to show you what part of you is still carrying the imprint of being harmed. We have all these wounds, they run deep, and the louder our judgment, the more they're asking to be healed. So yeah, people do take the piss and power is abused and systems are corrupt. But if we stop the conversation there, we're actually just in survival, because survival says this is just how it is and I need to protect myself from it forever. Healing is different. Healing says, this is what I've lived, but I get to choose how it shapes me now. The wound isn't what happened. The wound is in what we learnt to believe about ourselves because of it, if that makes sense. You might have experienced betrayal, manipulation, loss. That's real. But the unhealed part is the story, the script that got embedded in your nervous system. I'm not safe. People will always take. I need to stay alert or I'll be controlled. That belief shapes your state of being. It colours how you see the world, and that becomes the frequency that you live in, even when the threat is no longer there. That's how trauma loops work. Not because we're weak, but because our bodies are trying to protect us based on the past. The question isn't whether people like Bill Gates and the elites exist. It's whether you want them living rent-free in your body, holding your attention, hijacking your nervous system, keeping you in fear. You can acknowledge the truth of what's happening without letting it rule your state of being. That's what mirror work is. It's not blame, not bypass, just the decision to say, I won't carry this story any longer. Even if it was once true, I choose to heal the part of me that I believed was all I could expect. Every unhealed human carries some version of the same three core imprints. or wounds. I'm not enough. So basically, I'm not safe or I'm not loved. That's it. Strip away the surface patterns, the personality traits, the coping mechanisms, and underneath all of that are those three beliefs most of us are still carrying in some form. So I'm not enough, I'm going to be abandoned, and I'm going to be rejected. And the world, it reflects them back constantly, especially through people we most despise. Let's break it down. When you look at someone in an elite position and feel rage, it might be triggering your I'm not enough wound. That person might represent hoarding, control, an empire built on accumulation and fraud. And that can poke the part of you that still feels there's not enough to go around, scarcity, lack, and that you'll always have to fight for scraps, prove your worth, or be invisible next to those with more. If your reaction is fear, helplessness, or deep mistrust, you're likely being shown, I'm not safe. That's the wound. This is primal, the belief that you are vulnerable to forces bigger than you. That you could be taken, tricked, silenced, and there's nothing you can do. That fear comes from a childhood trauma or generational imprinting, or just growing up in a world where safety was never modelled. You're not taught it. And if the wound is deeper still, if you feel a hatred or disgust that lingers, you might be touching, I'm going to be rejected, I'm not loved. That belief doesn't always look soft. It can harden into judgment, detachment, or even superiority, because the part of you that wasn't met with love will look at someone else who misuses power and unconsciously think, see, this is why love can't be trusted. This is why I have to do it all myself. None of this means you're making up the corruption. It means the corruption is showing you where you're still carrying it internally. So instead of judging the mirror, ask, what part of me is still trying to feel safe by making someone else the villain? What part of me is still waiting for the external world to change so I can feel okay? That's where your power is. That's where sovereignty lives. Not in denial, but in full, clear ownership of your energy. Here's where it gets real. Most people still think the world is something out there, something solid, fixed, separate. But it isn't. Not according to quantum physics. Quantum reality tells us that nothing is truly solid. At the atomic level, everything is made up of energy, particles that exist in a state of probability until they're observed. Until consciousness interacts with them, that means the world doesn't just exist independently of us. It's shaped by how we see it, by what we expect, by what we project. And it's not a metaphor, it's measurable. Your internal state, your frequency, it organizes the field around you. Just like a tuning fork causes nearby strings to vibrate in its resonance, your nervous system, your beliefs, your energy patterns are always influencing what you perceived and what you attract. So when you heal the belief, I'm not enough and I'm not safe, your nervous system stops scanning for threats. And guess what? The world stops reflecting danger back. Not because the world's changed, but because your perception and resonance did. And when you shift out of people will always take from me and that scarcity, you stop vibrating at the frequency that invites the takers. The people who used to trigger you, they either bugger off, they might soften, do the work themselves, or they no longer get under your skin because the mirror is clean. The mirror cannot reflect what isn't there. This is how the field works. Energy first, matter second. What you are inside is not separate from what you see outside. Now, let's zoom out. Imagine if millions of us started doing the inner work and healing, not controlling, not bypassing, actually healing, regulating our nervous systems, owning our projections, releasing our addiction to fear and judgment. Do you honestly think the same systems of control would survive? They only exist because we're still holding them up with our fear, with our judgment, with our unhealed wounds. You want to dismantle the system? Start with the frequency that built it. Because the more of us who heal, the less resonance there is for tyranny to land. You don't have to fight it, you just have to stop feeding it. So what happens when we keep judging? We stay in this cycle, in the same frequency we want to leave behind. Judgment feels powerful in the moment. It's like clarity and control, but it's actually trauma. It's a fear dressed up as righteousness. It's your nervous system trying to find safety by locating an enemy. And while you're focused on who's wrong, you miss what's still wounded in you. Judging the mirror delays your healing, and it delays the collective shift. We're here to create, because as long as we're pointing fingers, we're not integrating, we're not learning, we're not choosing a new frequency. We're just rehearsing the old one with a different language. That's how the system stays alive, not just through media or medicine or big pharma, but through the energy we carry while we whinge about it and oppose it. And here's the most confronting bit of all. The external world cannot shift until the internal world does. You can't build a free world from dysregulated nervous systems. You can't dismantle control by clinging to it in your thinking. You can't birth a new paradigm while you're still vibrating with the wounds of the old. This is why the inner work matters more than ever. Because when you finally stop judging, when you look at the mirror and ask, what's this showing me about me? You start to collapse the illusion and the veil falls. You stop being food for the system. You become the frequency of change, and the field responds, not because you forced it, because you aligned with the truth. And when enough of us do that, the old world won't need tearing down. It will just dissolve. This isn't new, by the way. The idea that your inner world shapes your outer world. It's not just like spiritual fluff or fringe theory. It's wisdom that's been passed down for thousands of years, but we've missed it. We've had it from mystics, philosophers, and scientists alike. Same message, different words. So from the mystics and the masters, the kingdom of God is within you. Jesus. He wasn't pointing to a place, he was pointing to a state. The power isn't out there, it's already in you. We are shaped by our thoughts, we become what we think. When the mind is pure, joy follows like a shadow that never leaves. Buddha. Your reality is not built on circumstances, it's built on your inner state. And then we can go to, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. It's Proverbs 23:7. Not just what you think intellectually, but what you believe deep in your being. That's what forms the mirror. And if you want to look at the modern science and psychology, here's a quote. Reality is merely an illusion, albeit a very persistent one, and that's Albert Einstein. Your senses tell you that the world is solid and fixed. Quantum physics says otherwise. The field is the sole governing agency of the particle. Again, Einstein. In other words, energy, the field, determines matter, what we see. What you emit, you shape. And here's something by Niels Bohr. I'm sorry if I've pronounced his name incorrectly. Everything we call real is made of things that cannot be regarded as real. There's no such thing as solid, separate reality. It's all interconnection, observation, vibration. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And that's Carl Jung. This is the mirror. The unhealed parts of you don't just stay, you don't want to keep them hidden. They just run the show from the background. And what we resist persists. Judgment is resistance. And resistance feeds the very thing we're trying to escape. So if you're still with me, great. This means something in you recognizes the truth of this, even if it's uncomfortable. And if it did make you uncomfortable, that's cool. You can blame me if you need to. But before you do, let me ask you something. Where do your feelings take place? Inside or outside of you? If you answered inside, then how can anyone else trigger you, control you, or be responsible for your emotional state? They can't. They can only hold a mirror that reveals what still needs healing in you. So please don't give your power to others. Not politicians, not celebrities, not influencers, not the person who wronged you, not even someone like Bill bloody Gates. What happened to the world in 2020 should never be forgotten. But we can't heal it by looping, guys. We can't in this fear. Because the fear is the frequency that built the system and the problem that you are complaining about. And fear is still the frequency that's running the show. Don't believe me? Look around. Blackouts across Spain and Portugal. Chat of dimming the sun. Normalized control. Normalized silence. Normalized trauma. This is the byproduct of a world vibrating in fear. You can keep looping in rage. You can keep waiting for them to change so you can have peace. But don't expect to see a new world reflected back if the frequency you're tuned into is still one of anger and disconnection. As above, so is below. And maybe you're thinking, but I didn't comply. I didn't get jabbed. Didn't wear a mask. That's not the point. The question is, are you actually in your body? Do you still react from old wounds? Do you argue out of habit? Do you scroll in panic, control, and out of fear? Do you lash out? Do you collapse? Because if we want to tune into a new frequency, we have to be it. Let's take a water analogy for a second. And this is why we're not separate, okay? Imagine a big cup of water, and that's consciousness, pure awareness, truth, source, whatever you name it, that's fine. Now imagine taking a drop from that cup and putting it in its own glass, then another and another. Each drop is still the same water. It just looks separate now. Each one is in its own container, each one shaped by its own story, its own wounds, its own perception. That's us. We walk around thinking we're separate, but we came from the same source. We are the same source. And here's the thing, every time you shame yourself, you poison your own drop. Every time you judge another person, you poison theirs, but it all returns to the same cup. So whatever you pour into the world, anger, blame, hate, you drink too. That's why this matters. Not to be better, not to be spiritually elite, but because we are the same field. We are the mirror. And when one of us gets healed, the water gets clearer for everyone. You don't have to fix the world. It's not even a thought that should cross your mind. But you do have to get honest about what you're pouring into it, because whatever you send out, you'll meet again and again, every time.